All right. There you go. We're
Awesome.
live. It's all happening.
We're doing it. Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Trying to Be Better with Joel and Steve podcast. I love that every time I introduce, I think that Steve just gets such a kick out of the fact that I don't know. It's just, I love your giddiness every time I do the intro.
It makes me so happy. It really, truly does.
It really does. We get that laugh out of you. Which
Plus, market research has indicated that people really like it when I laugh like Jeff Bridges. So
yes, you do have the Jeff Bridges thing. And it is like, I listened to a couple episodes ago and it was like you were in full Jeff Bridges mode, full dude
it's not
mode.
intentional. Although since Matt said that, I'm like, okay, now I can't get it out of my head.
Yes, it's so good. Welcome to the podcast, everybody. We have a really special guest tonight. We're finally going on our blind date that we've teased the last few episodes. But before we get to any of that, follow us on Instagram at Trying to Be Better Podcast and email the show.
ttbbpodcast@gmail.com.
I'm so gun shy with that now. I just let Steve do it.
It's fine, man. The trauma will heal itself.
I don't know that that's how trauma works, but maybe we'll get into that with our guests.
Sure. Okay.
All I want to say is, and this is me being totally self-centered, I just watched like 4 or 5 episodes of Ted Lasso with my wife. As if you need,
what is that?
It's a TV show. Everybody needs to watch Ted Lasso. That's all. That's my only plug. Tonight's brought to you by Raspberry Bubbly. I think all the housekeeping is out of the way.
And grapefruit bubbly.
Okay. All right. We're getting lit tonight.
That's right.
James looks like he's got something in a highball glass. Looks like a lot of vodka, or maybe it's just water. We're not sure. But can we give a big Trying to Be Better podcast welcome to James Beaudreau?
Hi, James.
Hey. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Good to be with you.
Yeah.
We're so glad you're here, man.
Yeah, very exciting.
James, so we got to kind of hear about James a few episodes ago with Andy Acetis. James is the band leader and sort of ringleader and creative force behind the band Bell Helium, and probably several other projects I'm getting the vibe from, but I can't wait to hear about some of that stuff. So welcome, James. I'm so glad you're able to do this, dude.
Thanks. I'm psyched to do it.
Thank you so much. I was real excited just to get an email, and then it was from you, and and it was just real nice. And I really appreciate your openness to do this and to chat a little bit.
Sure. Hey, I think what you had said was, I think you had said that you're like, yeah, folks, has anyone emailed us? I can relate. I can relate releasing something and being active, putting something out there in the world, and it's busy out there, so you don't always get a lot of feedback. So
yeah, be careful out there, everybody. If you email us, you might just wind up on the podcast.
Right. That's how that works. Yep.
So I guess, I mean, I don't know how we start this, James, but I guess I'm really curious, like, where are you from? Like, where did you originate from? Where did you grow up? What were your formative years like?
I grew up in Long Island, and Anne and I were actually from the same small town.
Oh, no kidding.
Relatively small town, Port Washington in Long Island.
Mm-hmm.
And we went to high school together. I think she was 1 year earlier than 1 year behind me in high school. And so, yeah, I grew up there. It is still a beautiful port town in Long Island on the north shore of the island. And, when I was a kid, I actually talked to Anne about this sometimes. She actually still lives there now. She's moved away a number of times, and now she's living there again. And it's just it's like a postcard town. It's this beautiful town, an amazing main street, and there's the docks and all the boats and everything else. And when I was a kid, I didn't really, you just think you're growing up where you grow up. And now, of course, now I'm like, oh my God, Port Washington is so beautiful. And of course, there's no way I could afford to live in Port Washington anymore.
Sure.
It is such a great town. But so I grew up there and started playing guitar when I was around 12 or so. My dad was a guitar player. When he was a teenager, he was in a band called the Emeralds. So this must have been like this was in the 60s, in the
Sure.
mid 60s, when
Yeah.
when the thing was like the surf bands.
Yeah. Okay. Uh-huh.
Yeah. So he had he had been the rhythm guitar player, I think. He was very like he actually never played anything for me, because by the time I was interested in it when I was 12, he hadn't touched the guitar in many years.
Oh.
And but I still have his guitar. It was a 1959 Supro Valtral, which is now actually a pretty like desirable guitar, I think because of the black keys mainly.
Okay.
Oh, there you go.
Yep.
I think Dan uses those guitars. And anyway, so so I started playing there. Then I was kind of mostly self-taught and started to get really into music at that time, and it was classic rock, and this is the mid 80s, and
Okay.
so there was a lot of AC/DC.
Yeah.
And,
Okay.
obviously like Led Zeppelin, AC/DC, and also coming up at that time was like Def Leppard, started
Sure.
to get big, and this is all like MTV had just started, and
So is that what you were listening to then?
yeah.
All right.
Those,
Sure. That's,
those
I
were
mean,
your
that's,
guys.
I mean, I'm very similar in that regard.
Yeah, one of my favorite at that time was probably Quiet Riot. They had that song, that cover, "Come On, Feel the Noise," with
Yeah.
that Slade tune, and that was one of the first records I ever bought. Was that Quiet Riot record?
My
Which
first
actually
LP
pretty good.
was that I bought with my own money was Pat Benatar's "Crimes of Passion."
Nice.
Yes, that was a staple in the record stores at the
There
time.
you go. Yep.
Yeah,
So that's what you were trying to do, James. You were trying to be like big, like stadium rock, big rock and roll, classic rock. That's what you were hammering out in your bedroom.
yeah, pretty much. At the very beginning, I think one of the first songs that I learned was Judas Priest, "Living After Midnight."
Oh,
Which is kind of a funny, song to like learn and play when you're, 13 or 12 years old or
Right,
something like that. I had no idea really what they were even talking about.
Right. But it sounded mysterious and scary and weird. So yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And it was easy enough to play.
Exactly. Well, that's the thing. Like when I picked up the guitar, and I haven't really kept up with it, but it was Nirvana. It was the power chords, whatever punk or Nirvana or anything I could play. As long as it was easy, I could figure it out. And that's what kind of opened the door.
Yeah. There was an easy-ish Led Zeppelin song, "The Rover" on Physical Graffiti.
love
Yep.
it.
It's like a pretty, the opening riff in that song is like pretty easy. So I learned that. Then I learned that was an easy guitar solo. And, and I just kind of really, took to it. And I was very sort of, I was a pretty nerdy kid, and guitar was like, in a way, something that I was immediately pretty good at.
Mm.
And I really kind of like really sort of dug into it and sort of got, became like pretty proficient and started teaching lessons while I was in high school. And, really, really went in deep on it, and was in, a bunch of bands at that time and stuff. And, it's good.
So in those high school bands, I'm curious, because I was kind of in and around high school bands. Were you in the kind of bands that were writing their own stuff in the style of, or were you playing mostly covers?
We were writing our own stuff. When I was 15 or something like that, got into a band, and we became, pretty serious, as serious as kids can be. But some of the guys in the band were older, a few years older, which at that time is like a really big difference. There was a guy who was like, 20 years old in the band, and I was 16 or something like that. That's like
Seasoned veteran.
Yeah, exactly.
The grizzled veteran and the 20-year-old. Yeah.
And we were serious. I mean, we wrote a bunch of, we wrote, I don't know, 40, 50 songs over a few years, and went into the studio and demoed them. And, I don't know how many tunes we demoed, but it was a lot. I still have them on cassette, probably 20 songs that we did. And we were good for a band of, kids.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
what became of those demos?
Nothing. I think I put a couple of them up on my SoundCloud or something. We eventually, I mean, we had some contacts from, like, I think in family members of the band, like, knew a lawyer who represented this band and that band, and we had some meetings, and we played some all the clubs in New York City. Before I was like 17 when I started playing the clubs in New York City and Brooklyn.
Mm-hmm.
And we opened up for some notable bands at that time.
Mm-hmm.
But nothing really came of it. We eventually switched lineups, and there was one demo that we made that actually had some legs for a minute, but it fell, as these things often do, it fell apart at the last minute. That stuff was with a singer from South Carolina named Danielle Howell, who has had like a nice kind of indie career. I bet we haven't been in touch in a while, but she was a brilliant singer-songwriter, and I met her when I was down in South Carolina for for part of a summer, playing down there. And when I was, 17, 18 years old, something like that. And she came up to New York, and we wrote some songs together, made a demo, and it started to get shopped around, and things were looking good. And then sort of like internally, the thing fell apart. And that's when I decided to take I had also started getting into jazz at that time. I had a teacher who was a really accomplished jazz guitarist. And when that fell apart at the ripe old age of whatever I was, 20 years old, maybe by that point, I felt like it was time for a change. And I went to school to be an English major.
There you go. Okay. Very good. Perfect.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it sounds like from your dad's music career prior to that, were family members really supportive of you going for it like that?
Yeah, absolutely. My dad used to come to all of the shows.
That's awesome.
That we did at all the local bars, and even in the city, he would travel, to come and see us and stuff. He was very supportive, and they were real proud of what we were accomplishing.
How far from Port Washington would like Manhattan be?
It's about a 45-minute train ride, and maybe an hour by car.
So did you like schlep all your gear in? Like, how did that work?
Oh yeah, like half stack amps and.
Did you put it on the train, or did you have a station wagon or something? How'd that work out?
It was just cars. It was just like, not even super big, cars, but we would just pack a couple of them up and we would drive in. We played at, we would play anywhere in the city. We played a couple of times at CBGB's.
Oh, no kidding.
Which was like a really kind of a mismatch for like what our style of music was at the time. I remember being, 18, 17 years old and pulling up outside CBGB's on a matinee on a weekend, and like, it was a punk scene.
Sure.
And fights on the sidewalk, and like we were bringing our like with our long hair and half stack amps, like going into
right. The Marshall Stack's not so much a punk thing, is it?
No, not very punk.
But you'll have to forgive me because I'm trying real hard to contain my fanboyism. Plus, I've been to New York, but only like as a tourist, and I saw the Dead at Madison Square Garden once, in and out but I have a romanticized version of that city, and also kind of a not so romanticized version of the city. But having done a little bit of schlepping gear in and out of clubs and that sort of thing over the years, I can't imagine dealing with that in New York.
Mm-hmm.
Like driving into the city, finding a place to park. Hopefully there'll be a place by the club. Maybe you got to go up an elevator. You got to go through some alley. God knows what you're stepping over in, and like, is my stuff going to get stolen? Like all of that. So for those about to rock, like I'm totally saluting you for just dealing with that.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah. I mean, I really look back on that and feel like it was definitely a young man's, a young man's game. what I was doing at that time.
Sure. That's kind of funny. Is it? Do you say that because of an energy factor, or because of like a tunnel vision? Like we're just getting their stuff into the gig, and you're not really thinking about all this other stuff, like just adrenaline and.
I think adrenaline, energy, fearlessness.
Right.
Just being like that young, and you sort of aren't as afraid.
Right.
You just sort of like,
you don't really think about what it is you're actually doing. You're just doing it.
Yeah.
We get older and we start thinking, well, you kind of know what it costs. You know what is at stake, maybe. And when you're young, you don't give a shit. You know what I mean? It's like
full throttle,
I'm just doing it.
Full throttle, dead ahead.
Yeah.
Yeah, and when you're younger too, I mean, I think that there was always, especially at this time, maybe culturally in the music scene at that time, the idea was that you paid your dues and you got to a point where you would make it. And so, and making it at that time was that you had to have the right person see you, and then you would be signed. And you would be like sort of transported from that world into a better level.
Yeah. Where you had somebody to schlep the gear for you.
Yeah.
Right. Exactly. But I mean, being in little bands in the middle of nowhere, Nebraska, that's not gonna happen. But like you're schlepping stuff around New York City, you're going to CBGB, you're going to clubs where there are people that could see you. But it's like I would equate it to my time in LA. It's like it's so close, but it's so far away because you have to almost conjure magic all of a sudden. And some people it happens, and some people it doesn't happen. But I could imagine that the electricity of that possibility in that city was a little more palpable than Columbus, Nebraska, perhaps.
Yeah, it's interesting to hear about. I can romanticize the idea of being in a small town and what being in a scene like that would feel like as a young band seems kind of cool to me. Because the thing was, in my experience of this, there really wasn't much of a scene. It was very competitive. We met other bands. We were doing this, we were friendly with a few of them, but it wasn't. It was really competitive. It was almost like what you would think of as like cutthroat business. But it's
that's interesting.
Long hair and big amps.
Yeah,
Lincoln, Nebraska, the city we're coming from, actually has a pretty vibrant music scene. In fact, we're coming up on. Did it just happen? Lincoln Calling.
Yeah, it was just last weekend.
Yeah. And it's like, 60 bands?
Yeah. Just insane. And everybody goes to see each other's stuff and supports each other. And the artists that you don't think are going to support the other kind of way off the map artists do. Yeah. Like it's a good scene. And I heard an interview with Joey Ramone talking about the cutthroat nature of New York, that they would do anything to sabotage the other band. Like it was like, brutal.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, I mean, and in retrospect, I feel like I'm pretty glad that we had some, we had some showcase shows where some, record company people showed up, and I'm glad in retrospect that nothing happened, that we didn't have much success at that time, because as the rest of my life sort of panned out, it probably wouldn't have been great to have had too much success. Right. I'd like to have a little more success now in later years, but it's probably for the best that didn't.
Yeah, right.
Maybe this is a question best answered later, but I'm gonna ask it anyway. So along the lines of what you just said, like you said you went to go to school to get an English major, but have you been what I will call a working musician for like how long? Like, did you get your now? Yeah, well, I mean, did you get your English degree and then like do something with that and then go back to like, are you a full-time musician?
No.
What does that look like?
I have not been a full-time musician, but for a very small period of time in the early 2000s.
Okay.
Other than that, I've always had jobs.
Sure. Okay.
And always did music as a side passion thing.
Sure.
And over the years, have like sort of made different. The one time that I was doing it as my job was when I was with a band called the Billy Nair Show, and I guess this is in the late '90s into the early 2000s.
Mm-hmm.
And that band was a San Francisco band that was pretty popular, like a kind of they called it like a sort of punk cabaret band.
That's
it
interesting.
Doesn't really describe it quite. It was like definitely like it was art rock.
Sure.
Okay.
The singer and sort of primary creative force is a sort of, he's still an amazing creative force. His name is Corey Maccabee, and he is like maybe you would say like a Tom Waits.
Oh,
okay.
Sort
okay.
of, but a little bit more David Lynch, like
ooh,
Nice.
that's a good combination.
Very dramatic songs about weird subjects.
Will you say the name of the group again?
Billy Nair.
Billy
Show.
Nair. Okay.
The Billy Nair Show.
All right.
And at that time, when I was with the group, they had always been making films also on the side, and they actually got to a point where they got investors to make a feature film. It was called The American Astronaut, and I think my title was like assistant musical director or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
And so basically I don't remember how long it was exactly, 6 months to a year, my job was to work on the music on that film.
Oh, wow. And so you wrote a lot of the music for it? You performed it, or both?
Yeah, I co-wrote the soundtrack, and then we performed it. And we have a couple of little bit parts in the movie.
Oh, cool.
I
cool.
play a guitar player in a bar band on an asteroid.
Oh,
Perfect.
Great.
That's the dream gig, really. That's what we're all aiming for, right? I just want to play on an asteroid sometime. So was it college? Did that sort of change your vibe? Like you got kind of out of rock and roll and into more into different stuff? Like did that kind of blow you? Did some things happen there? Did you play any music in college at all? And that sort of evolved you a little bit?
Yeah, in college, I got I really started to get into jazz, and I started to study it and try to play it. And I had some groups, and we would play it. I went to school in Binghamton, New York. It's one of the state schools here, and I did gigs as a guitar player in a jazz quartet and some like duo stuff. And and after that, after 4 years there, I got my degree. I was playing jazz on the side. I decided I wanted to make a little more of a real go at, playing music for a living, and came to New York City to the New School, which had a really good, and they still do have a really good jazz program there.
Mm-hmm. Isn't that the school that Bob Kerrey was like the president?
Yeah, he was the president of for a while. Yeah.
One of our former state governors here in Nebraska, Bob Kerrey, was he was the president of the New School for a while. Yeah.
So anyway, I've kind of always had my eye on the New School because of the actor's studio there. I've kind of always looked at that and held that in regard as a really cool, wild, not too unlike my grad school at Cal Arts, where I met Anne. It's like this kind of wild place where they let their students kind of go off the deep end instead of trying to inundate them with anything, so that's cool that you were able to. So you studied there then? I did. Yeah. I studied there for a year. I got like a partial scholarship to go. And so I went for a year, but after a year I would have stayed and continued, but I couldn't afford it. Yeah. It was expensive, and there was no way that was going to happen. And so at that point, that's when I started, getting jobs, whatever kind of job I could get. I got jobs as, working in, like in being an administrative assistant. I got jobs working as a project manager. Eventually I kind of ended up in doing marketing, and always doing music on the side since then, except for that a good stint in the early 2000s, like I was saying, with the Billy Nair Show. Did you move out to the Bay Area for that project, or were you just already out there? You
No,
said they were a San Francisco band, right?
Yeah, they were a San Francisco band that was sort of becoming a New York band. The drummer was, I actually met him at the New School. He was in one of my ensemble classes, and we kind of hit it off. And it turned out he was doing this totally non-jazz, amazingly creative music on the side.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, we hit it off.
That's awesome.
We toured there a bit.
What does non-jazz encompass? That's, to me, that's kind of like antipasto. It's like not pasta. It's like not jazz.
Yeah, I guess just in the context of like the New School, and like everything was jazz. It was like you're in the jazz ensemble, and everybody wanted to be like, as authentically jazz as possible, I think. Mm-hmm. And so, like really in the idiom, really like, authentically playing that music, which is a challenge.
Yeah. And that seems like a tough thing to nail down. Is there like, what criteria would you say would be authentic jazz? Do you have to have like a,
it has to sound like Dave Brubeck.
Yeah. Or like, is it like Bitches Brew? Or are we talking bebop, or like, what's the,
Yeah, I guess it was really bebop was sort of the language, the standard at the school.
Okay.
Certainly at the time. So this is late 1990s. I think that, so everybody was trying to be authentically like a real bebop player.
Sure.
And so Bobby, who was the drummer, who turned out he was doing this other thing, which was like almost like the way that I discovered it was almost like this secret. He had this secret project on the side that was
he was cheating on jazz. He was cheating on jazz. He had a mistress away from jazz, stepping out on jazz.
Exactly. He probably didn't see it that way, but that's the way that I saw it. I was like, oh wow, okay.
Yeah. That's cool. So what were your influences then? Like, I know the last artists you mentioned were Def Leppard and AC/DC. What started to blow your mind in the music world? Or was it kind of your own, or was it like the people around you?
Yeah, was there a record that made you say, "Oh, wait," or was it just being in the scene and being immersed in a kind of an academic shift?
I think the first thing was when a few years earlier, when I was maybe still in high school, I got a dream job working at Record World.
Oh, sure.
Nice. I always wanted to work at record stores, and then I did, for a while work there. I worked at Tower Records for a long time, and they had in the back room, which was classical and jazz, they had, I think it was a cassette of they had 2 Miles Davis cassettes back there. One of them was Kind of Blue, and the other one was Around About Midnight. And I remember the first time I remember really being affected by it was we were closing, and so it was all dark and there were no customers in the place. And on So What, I think it's So What, the first track, the system in the store was great, and that was my favorite thing about working at record stores, because they always had these great ceiling systems. And the sound of that walking bass line on that tune just kind of blew my mind.
I just got chills up and down my spine, because I had like the first time I heard that, it wasn't in a record store through a great stereo system, but it was through a decent stereo system, and I was in a state of mind where I was, receptive. And it was just, and a friend of mine looked at me at the first little horn pop and went, "So what?" And that was it. I was done. Right. And the rest is history. It was one of those moments. So anyway, I'm sorry to interrupt, but I relate to that moment a lot, actually.
Yeah, it's funny in a way when you think about jazz, you would think about like a trumpet solo or a saxophone solo or something. But the thing that hit me as a rock listener at that time was that bass line, and also that you could have just a bass line be the prominent feature of the music, which just seems so so outrageous, like so.
Well, I immediately I now have John Paul Jones playing Dazed and Confused in my head.
Well, yeah, that's actually a good precedent. Yeah.
But I get what you're saying.
I mean, sort of relegated to the rhythm, relegated to the low end, and to keep things, keep a foundation. I'm not a musician per se, but to keep things, to have a foundation and stuff, and then to pop that out like that. That's fascinating.
So was that like your jumping in point to the world of jazz, Miles, and that record? And
Yeah, it was that record, and then I had a teacher named Larry Meyer on Long Island, who was a pupil of a jazz piano teacher named Lenny Tristano, who was like a big guy in the 40s and 50s and 60s. He was on Atlantic Records. He was a brilliant, genius piano player. And Larry I wanted to learn how to play jazz at first because I wanted to become a better rock player. I just wanted to find out the tricks of being of jazz and then sort of apply that to rock. And then,
that's legit. Like that's a,
well, yeah. I mean, I know it's a huge step in time, but I hear that in Bell Helium. You know what I mean? I hear that cross pollination a little bit. So that's cool to know that intention was set a while ago and it's maybe carried you through. Would you say, is that kind of that you chasing that question has sort of been a constant for you?
I appreciate you saying that because I guess maybe in a way, yeah, I guess so. I for a while I tried to be a jazz guitar player because I really did get deep into the music and I got heavily into guitar players like Grant Green was my favorite, all of his Blue Note records. And I got really into some horn players like Joe Henderson is probably my favorite, and Sonny Rollins, and a lot of, I got really, really deep into it. And for a while I was really I wanted to play that music. And I never really it never really took entirely in me. I never felt that I got to that point where I was legitimately playing in that style. And, in retrospect now, I can see that, this rock music that I grew up in and still also love, it's sort of my roots. And it's also, so I guess, yeah, trying to sort of bring the two things together is what I've tried to do. For a while, there was some time in the 2000s where I was really doing more experimental music and sort of took a turn towards not wanting to play anything. I wanted to play only stuff that would not be expected. And I did, and I was really trying to find, I kind of went through some, after I left the Billy Nair show, I went through a period where I wanted to sort of reignite my love of playing the guitar. I felt like I had gotten a little too sort of cavalier about it and a little professionalized maybe. And so I went through a period where I decided to, what would I play if I didn't play any songs that I knew and I didn't play any scales or chords that I knew. So what if I just picked up the guitar and I was like just born and just had this thing, and what would happen? And so I started working on that.
Wow.
And I ended up, I was working on it just to work on it. And I was recording it to listen back and determine if I was coming up with anything or getting anywhere. And eventually I really liked what was coming up, and I tried to then sort of incorporate those improvisations into some compositions, and it was losing all of the magic of it. And so what I ended up doing was releasing my first solo album was actually those recordings.
And that album, that recording is listed on the flyer that came in the Bell Helium record, I believe.
Yeah, that's cool. The Java Street Bagatelles record. And I actually made a bunch of that record while I was living with Anne in Greenpoint.
I just think that's fascinating, James, that you were like feeling like maybe you were getting a little too, almost like, and correct me if I'm wrong, but it sounds like I'm getting a little too good, or maybe I'm too comfortable, or I'm too, I know where I'm headed with the things I'm interested in with this particular instrument. I am going to
blow it up.
I'm going to blow it up. I'm going to clean the slate and try to see what else is there and try to like, what would I, if I didn't know anything, what would I do? And not like relearn, but like, I don't know, like it's like falling in love again or something, like like redoing your vows or something. Like, what is this now? Cause I've been in this relationship with music or the guitar. What else is there? I think that's profound. And it's cool that, things came up from that.
Yeah, I really felt like I was, I'd gotten to a point where I really wasn't enjoying playing the guitar particularly. I was just kind of doing, I had just gotten into like a kind of a negative mind space with it. And there was some changes going on in my life at that time. I was around 29, 30 years old. Mm-hmm. And I had been through, living it up a little too much, and kind of, I call it that, it wasn't living it up. There was nothing sort of glamorous about my lifestyle, but I was just living too hard and not kind of really getting anywhere. And I felt like the guitar playing for me had become like something I sort of took for granted, and there was no magic in it anymore for me. Mm-hmm. I was just sort of had gotten cynical, and I really wanted to have a more sort of spiritual experience with it, and find out what does it mean to me to what do I want to play? Like, okay, so I'm tired of everything was a calculation. It was sort of like, oh, I'm coming up with this idea. What can I use it for? Can it slot into this kind of idea, or can I play it with a band like with that? And I got really I wanted to sort of, like you said, like blow it up.
It sounds like a trap that I can get into with anything, but anything creatively is when I'm trying to predict the results. And then you have to kind of figure out your way to try to anticipate results that you have no control over. So it's like, it just feels empty. It feels like a hungry ghost that's never getting fed. That's, yeah. Do you think that as a result of that kind of breaking it apart, that you did find a spirit, like you said, you wanted to find a spiritual connection to it. Do you think you did?
I think I did. Yeah. And it led me, I ended up doing 3 albums like that.
Wow.
I did one, the first one was in 2006, and that was Java Street Bagatelles. And that was really those super lo-fi recordings. I mean, if I look back on it now, I actually listened to that record, that CD for the first time in years, fairly recently. And I was, on the one hand, really kind of, I was impressed with like how bold it was to have released it at all, because I recorded it on, a lot of it was recorded on, those like old Panasonic or whatever the brand was, like cassette decks that are just like these rectangular black things. And
I got one sitting in the next room. I thought
you were going to say like a 4-track, but this is even more lo-fi than that.
Yeah.
It was just a $20 cassette deck on like the cheapest like tapes you can get, because I really wasn't initially, planning to do anything that anybody else was going to hear it.
Yeah.
I thought I would maybe like learn stuff from it. But anyway, so I have a sense that it was, I feel good about that record, although I also sort of feel a little bit like it's kind of hard to listen to. So I'm kind of amazed that it's actually, in terms of like press and in terms of, I guess press or attention, it's been the most, it was the most successful thing I've done, which is, I don't know if it was beginner's luck, like in 2006, like I got one of the tracks on NPR. I got a bunch of good reviews, ended up playing a festival in Portland, Maine that I was invited to because of that record.
Nice.
And then I did the follow-up in 2008 was called Fresh Twigs. And it was really the same. It was the same idea, but what I started doing was I started using a computer to record, and I started layering things. So whereas the first record was all pretty much as it happened, just snippets from these tapes.
Yeah.
The second one, I started to put things together and use editing in a creative way. And it was less lo-fi, still a little lo-fi, but less
Sure.
lo-fi. And it started to get a little closer to rock.
Yeah.
There's a couple of things on the second album that are riff based, and
Right, sure.
so I was starting to move back in that direction. And then by the third one, which was 2011 album called Astral Law, that was even more intricately layered and almost like soundtrack type of really forensic digital editing of pieces together to make compositions. And I didn't realize what I was doing at the time, but I made those 3 records, and then that was sort of the end of that type of music making for me. Just because I started, moving on to some different things.
So it wasn't that you lost the magic. It was just like you felt like you'd kind of completed that era.
I think maybe, yeah. A buddy of mine, Philip Lynch, a good friend of mine, who's a brilliant singer-songwriter that I think people don't understand, like how amazing his songwriting is. Anyway, so he's a buddy of mine. He's not like an ambitious guy in terms of like putting himself out there, but I really felt like his work was like, I wanted to make a record of his stuff. And so what we ended up doing was when I finished my 3rd record, I sort of started producing his record, and it took us a long time. It took us years to get it done because we were doing it on weekends and some weeknights, and his music is very intricate and sort of it was a labor of love, and it was and it started to turn my attention, I think, even more back towards my rock background and my love of that. And so we released that one in 2014. His record is called At the Start at Long Last. And I wish more people knew about it, because I really do feel like it's one of those records that later on people will say like, oh yeah, there was this amazing record. This is so obscure. Like nobody, we all hope that we're involved in projects like that. Right. I mean, that's sort of, but I do feel like, I do feel like that's a good candidate for that, for that kind of thing to happen, his record. Yeah, so I did that, and that kind of, I think, sort of like was like a palate cleanser for me or something. And by the time that was wrapped up in around 2014, 2015, I had gotten seriously back into the Grateful Dead. Just,
Seriously,
you poor bastard.
I mean, like I've got the spreadsheets of the, I've got like databases of all of the.
What precipitated that?
Yeah, right.
I honestly don't know what it was. When I was a bit younger, I never saw them live, because when I was a kid, I was into, in the 80s or in the early 90s, when I would have had a chance to see them, I was not into the Grateful Dead. I didn't really know about them, and I was into like music that was totally like not lining up with the Grateful Dead.
Yeah, I have a similar story, so I get it.
A quick plug for something related. I don't know if you're familiar with the good old Grateful Dead cast. It's it's a Grateful Dead Inc. production, but this last episode of it is fantastic, and it gets into all this incredibly diverse list of musicians and their paths to and within that community. And in particular, Joe Russo, who also hails, from New York, said that when he was of that age, he said that where he was at, you were either a Deadhead or you were into hard rock. And he made the decision that the Grateful Dead could go fuck themselves, and he was into hard rock. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. And then years and years and years later, here he is playing with Bob Weir and Phil Lesh and Jay Rad and all that. So anyway, it's just a really delightful hour and a half of listening, that particular podcast.
Oh yeah, that sounds great.
It's great.
Yeah.
Anyway, I digress. You got into the Grateful Dead.
Yeah. What? How?
Um,
Why?
Yeah, around the time that I was sort of trying to get back to loving playing guitar, I had a friend who turned me on to Dick's Picks 16,
Mm.
which is like what is it? It's on the shelf over here.
Yeah, I'm curious now.
16 is it's November 8th, 1969 at the Fillmore.
Oh yeah. Uh-huh.
And it's just a monstrous. My entry into it was this, because it's just this monstrous acid rock.
It's incendiary.
Oh my God, it's
White hot.
Incendiary. Yeah. And so I started to get into them then, and I don't know what happened around 2015 or so, but I just caught it, and I went in real deep, and so
Isn't that funny though? Because I think that's I don't know if it's a common thread, but it's along my thread, because like the hard rock thing, like the AC/DC and the Judas Priest and all that, and then the jazz. I mean, those two kind of worlds, the Grateful Dead is all in there.
Yeah,
it's all in there. And then you throw in the bluegrass and the folk and the avant-garde and the noise and it all just kind of rolls into one.
Blues.
And there's Jerry Garcia standing there going, I don't know, man. Don't ask me,
Yeah, it's just a meeting of all of these amazing, all of the best threads of like American culture.
Yeah.
Are like woven in there, and in addition to that, it's the thing that's at the heart of the Grateful Dead, which I certainly didn't know when I was a kid. And I guess I wouldn't have been interested in it when I was a kid, but it's really the spiritual connection and the sort of transcendence that can happen when you have a group of people playing without ego for sort of towards a common goal, which is really in a way, it's like to get high. It's to get like as high as possible on the sound and on the interaction, and then to also have the audience feed back into that. Right. So it's almost like this chemistry experiment. Yeah. And
it absolutely is.
Yeah.
Just this morning, I was having a conversation with a coworker, and I work in a little town in Nebraska. And this guy's one of the maintenance guys at my facility, and he lives in Syracuse. And we just started talking. Turns out he used to go to, like, one of his brother-in-law or something would take him to Lollapalooza in Chicago for like 5 years running. So like he's seen some shit, right? That I never would have expected. I would expect him to be like Garth Brooks, Luke Bryant, Georgia Country Line, whatever, And so we're standing there having this conversation, and my mind's being blown again with my own, I guess, my preconception of what this guy was into, Right. Turns out he's really so I started talking about the Dead a little bit. He's like, well, what do you like? And I found myself saying to him that Grateful Dead concerts weren't rock concerts so much as they were just experiments. We just showed up for the experiment. And he's like, oh yeah, okay. Like they never played, like he was very receptive to that idea.
Yeah.
And again, I had to check myself, like, dude, you totally prejudged this guy.
Yeah.
That he wouldn't get it and he was like, oh yeah, I can totally see why you would go see that so many times or whatever, Yeah. But I did not, when I was going to shows actively, I did not appreciate that element of it. It's way later that I literally kind of had that moment this very morning, having this conversation, finding myself saying it was really just an experiment. It's an ongoing experiment. Even when I was seeing them in the 90s, they didn't know what was going to happen. The sound system was continually in flux. It was, I mean, it had gotten a little formulaic just due to necessity, but there was the X factor could still happen on any given night. And it was amazing.
Yeah. And sometimes it wouldn't happen. And Correct. Like that was part of it. It's like you can't manufacture, you know what I mean? Like, and I think one thing about the Grateful Dead to me is that in my experience of being on the outskirts of the jazz scene, and I know a lot of jazz musicians, and I really love and appreciate jazz. I go see a lot of jazz concerts. Is that there's a certain sort of like you show up, you're at such an elevated level as a musician at all times anyway, that you like show up and you just almost like turn it on. Like you just like sort of flip the switch and you get to that place, that sort of ecstatic place or whatever in the 40 or 50 minute set. So that's sort of, so this is my formulation of it. So there's that in jazz, which is sort of almost like, I'm going to use this word and I kind of feel bad about it, but like almost professionalized. It's almost like it's so hyper perfected, and that it just sort of, there's almost something that's like a little, it's awesome to watch that, but it's not mystical. And in rock, and in some rock bands, you can get to a kind of mystical kind of thing, but that would often happen like with sheer power and volume.
Yeah.
Like if you think of like, you know, like Led Zeppelin.
And fireworks.
Yeah, really kind of like
sparks.
Creating it, right? Creating it. The pyro goes off and then this and that. And or total debauchery, like or we're gonna be so sleazy. So sleazy that it's going to be like there's going to be this queasiness watching the band because you don't know what's going to happen. It could all fall apart. In the Grateful Dead, it wasn't about any of that stuff. In fact, they had a lot of shitty gigs, and they made. I mean, you can't find even the top Grateful Dead shows that were ever played have bum notes and they're like bad notes like in the worst spots.
They never played a perfect concert ever.
Never played a perfect concert. And so by the measure of the world, or at least the world that I was sort of coming from, it was sort of like, well, it's a total failure.
Right.
Grateful Dead is a total failure. And
on
that's what
every level.
A beautiful failure.
Like Jerry Garcia was not the greatest guitar player in the world. The drummers, they didn't play jazz, kind of, maybe, sort of. It was like me trying to play jazz. Like I can fake it, you know.
Phil Lesh was the real. I mean, he was the real sort of nuts and bolts musician. Real, you know what I mean? Like he was like
he was the only one he was the only
chops.
one that was actually like classically trained.
Yeah.
Mickey Hart played in the army, so he had some chops.
Sure.
Jerry Garcia was a scholar. And Bob Weir was this spaced out weirdo kid. his primary credentials was just being pathologically anti-authoritarian. You're in, you know. Maybe practice a little bit, Bobby.
But when you put it together and you have this commitment, you know, it's a commitment to the group, and it's the commitment to the group in the moment, and you're working towards something together, it's astonishing what can happen. Because the thing is that the Grateful Dead, though, by the measure of like academic jazz or by like, you know, whatever, like perfect like rock, you know, bands or whatever, are can be awful.
They're awful.
No one else gets to that place that they get to.
And they often did that just by like religion, like stumbling and bumbling into it.
Right.
So I found that just, you know, incredibly inspiring. And so that I think drove me to like really dig into, because I wanted to find all of the examples of those transcendent moments.
That's searching for the sound.
Right. So is that was a journey that you went on with the Dead post your experimental solo projects, is that right? And then so that kind of opened you up into that. So how did your entrance to the bus, so to speak, inform more music then? Did that turn around and kind of shape things for you?
Yeah, I just, after we did Philip's record, and I just decided that you know, getting older, like, I don't know what I'm going to try to accomplish. I really just decided I just want to play. I hadn't been playing live a heck of a lot. And I was like, I just want to play. And what do I want to play? I want to play with a group of musicians, have loose set lists based on Grateful Dead and similar music. And I want to be able to go and improvise and see if we can get if I can get some of that, philosophy, take that philosophy and see what I can get out of it.
Sure, man.
So I did that for a few years, and that's when Anne, it was just the James Beaudreau band, because I figured, well, I didn't really know what to call it. It was just an experiment, and the Jerry Garcia band. Let's just not be precious about it.
Yeah.
So I just called it that. And Anne joined after a while, and it was like this rotating cast of musicians.
Yeah.
And there were some really nice moments, and it felt great at times, but it was trying to like create that kind of dynamic in the workaday world of New York City. Like, you get like 40 minutes on stage, you hump your shit up onto the stage, and you plug everything in, and maybe you haven't rehearsed, and the bass player couldn't make it because he got a playing gig, and so you got somebody that's never heard the stuff before. And the reality of it was that after a few years, I think it was 2 or 3 years of doing monthly gigs in this mindset, it started to get really exhausting because there was no audience catching on. There was no like real momentum building, and there were some great peak moments, but there were some gigs that were, the players didn't line up, and it was kind of, so I just started to feel like I still want to play, and I still want to do this, but I need to refine it. Like, people aren't coming just because there's this band in Harlem playing, Help Slip Franklin's, Crazy Fingers, are doing like a Grateful Dead set. Like, they're just not coming. So, and without the audience feeding back into it, it also just starts to feel kind of like
difficult.
Yeah.
And so I thought, if we have original material, and can consolidate a group and make a record, that it just felt like the next step. And so that's what I did. I took the people that had been in and out of my band that seemed to match up well together, like personality wise and musically, and asked them if they would be willing to participate in this. And so the folks that did the Bell Helium record, agreed to do it. And and that's where and then the pandemic, and so here we are.
So I think it's really fascinating though that exploration into dead music in some way opened up this idea that you chasing those magic moments and finding the same lifts and valleys allowed you to kind of say, well, I want to try this, but with original work, I think it shows up in the record. It's a beautiful piece. It's really great. And, truth be told, Anne's on the record. So I'm like, I'll buy the record. Sure. I'll buy your record, Anne. And then I listened to it. I'm like, holy shit. It's very good. And,
I'll chime in on that.
Yeah, please.
I'm holding it right here. I feel like David Letterman for the folks at home. This is the record, we're audio only, but yeah. And it's really funny, like hearing what we've been talking about makes a lot of sense, because there's a thing about this record that you made that is simultaneously very comfortable, but also very fresh. There's elements that I'm like, oh yeah. It's really this really delightful line of like this, like I've kind of heard this before, but not this way. And so all of your influence is like, well, of course it feels that way.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And there's a couple moments, the last 2 tracks, I enjoy the whole record. And in particular, I like your guitar tone and I like the production of it. It has an energy to it that doesn't often happen in, studio records. I don't know if you guys recorded it mostly live in the studio.
Yeah.
That comes across, but the last 2 tracks are just transcendent,
dude.
It's all enjoyable, but I was just kind of folding laundry and I flipped over to the B-side and I was just sitting there listening to it. And then I was kind of laying down on my couch, which I don't get to do very often. So I relish those moments, but that forever ago. So is it Plover? Is that how you say that?
Plover. Yeah.
that track got my attention. Anytime and I said this, I can't remember if I said it directly to Anna or later, but anytime there's like a kind of a danceable beat and a Fender Rhodes playing slightly outside, like I'm in. I'm hooked. Like that is right up. I'm like a dog with the scratching in the leg. Like, keep hitting that spot, I just love that.
Yeah.
And then but your guitar playing, I love the tone, and you do these tasty little runs that are kind of they're playful and articulate, and I've just enjoyed the shit out of it.
Yeah.
And that Forever Ago song, that's an all-time keeper.
I totally agree. James, is it true that one almost didn't make the record?
Yeah, it is. It was one of the ones that up through like the overdubbing stage and mixing stage that I was like, the record's too long, and I knew it was too long for vinyl. The sides were a little long, and so the engineer I was working with was like, you really should cut one, and so that was one that I'm so glad we didn't cut that one, because it really did end up being, it's one of my favorites now. And I don't know when the change happened, but I appreciate both of you guys' feedback on that. I really do appreciate it.
Yeah, it's gorgeous. It really is. And it's something that I think becomes infinitely more interesting and delightful the more I hear it. It's like there are some that are Beautiful Day is one that is just simply gorgeous. It's just like,
that's one of my favorites too.
I don't write a lot of music, but I understand that like to create something, to write something that is just simple and gorgeous and sort of just fits is no small feat, like that's a favorite of mine as well.
Yep.
So thanks.
Well,
yeah.
I think we're kind of getting close to our time here. Joel, do you have anything you want to ask James?
James, welcome to the lightning round. So here's the thing though. It's like, we've already kind of talked about a lot of your influences.
Yeah.
So I'm going to throw a little bit of a curve.
Okay.
But when it comes to music, because I feel like the folks at home can't see this, but James is sitting in front of a tower of music that could, topple over and end his life any minute now. What are some surprises? What are like 3 or 4 surprise albums, artists that you haven't mentioned that they could even be guilty pleasures, Like, I'm not afraid to admit I love Kesha. So like, is there anything that is like weird, obscure that you think we should know about, or maybe surprise artists that you would take with you on a desert island, maybe?
Sure. There's a band from California, 1968, I think, called The David. And
The David. Okay.
Yeah, and they put out a record called Another Day, Another Lifetime.
Okay.
And it was on a small label. I don't remember what the label was, but some weird label. Anyway, years ago, a guy at a record store that I loved turned me on to them, and they were a bunch of teenagers, like 16 to like 19 years old, and I think that they made a masterpiece of pop, psychedelic rock that the guy who did the arrangements on the record, it's pretty highly orchestrated. It's like a garage band plus orchestration. And the guy that did the orchestration on it later went on to be a very famous disco strings guy. So like you could hear in this 1968 record hints of later disco types of production treatments, strings play like the same hits over and over again and stuff like that. And the principal songwriter had a really special quality where he almost sounds a little bit like 80s British goth somehow, or nice. like mixed in. There's this melancholy sort of 80s vibe in this 60s record. And I remember 10 years ago or 15 years ago when I first kind of got into the record, there was nothing really online about it. Like the psychedelic guys would be like, it's not psych enough. And the garage guys would be like, there's too much, orchestration on it.
They're too talented.
Yeah. And nobody really, but what I noticed recently, I actually found an original copy. It's been like one of my Grail records to find an original copy. They go, a good copy goes for like a couple of $100 on Discog.
Wow.
And I didn't really I wanted to find one in the wild, and I did recently. And so I looked it up online, and it seems like people are starting to go like, this record actually may not just be like, a garbage record. It may actually be special. And it's interesting to see how a record can go, reputation wise. I listened to it again recently, and I still think that it's a masterpiece.
Cool. Love it.
Yeah.
So that's one.
Give me a guilty pleasure. Give me something that we would all be shocked to know.
Well, I don't know how. It's not too guilty. I don't know but one of my favorite bands from the '80s is Men Without Hats.
Nice.
Sure.
Yes.
Yeah.
They had the Safety Dance.
Yeah. Love it.
Like their big hit in like '83 or something. But the record that I was on is called Rhythm of Youth, and that is a wonderful record. And
does that have Pop Goes the World on it?
No, that was like the next one.
All right.
They had a string of records there that are just brilliant. So there was that one. There was Folk of the '80s Part 3, I think, was the follow-up record, and then Pop Goes the World was the next one. I just love that band. I can never get tired of them.
I'm gonna have to do a deep dive on Men Without Hats now, because that's the Safety
that's
Dance
awesome.
is all I'm familiar with. So I'll check it out. Wow. Well, thanks, James. What an honor.
It's been really great.
Yeah, man. The album is Bell Helium, and you can listen to it streaming services, but we highly recommend buying the actual
LP.
vinyl. The LP.
Sounds great.
It sounds beautiful. What an honor, man. Congratulations on the record. And I hope you guys are going to get to play some of this music live, hopefully.
Yeah.
I hope so. I think we will. I'm sure we will. It'll be in the fall, but I'm looking forward to it.
Very cool.
Yeah.
Great. All right, man. Nice talking with you.
Good talking to you. Thanks.
Thanks,
you.
James.